Hey, deserving listeners, it's just me today. I thought I would respond to your emails. This first email is from an anonymous patron. She actually just emailed me just now, but I don't know if she wanted me to read this on the air, and I won't read her name or read everything that she said. But one of the things that she said, which really stood out to me, and I've heard this before from a few people, not many, but a few, saying that at the end of the episode, when I say take care of yourself, they really take it to heart, to the point where she says here, the first time I listened to your show and heard your sign-off, I cried my eyes out. And honestly, I still get teary hearing it at the end of every episode, every time. So that's great, because I sometimes worry that when I say it at the end of an episode, it can just sound like this sign-off, like this, unfelt random thing that I say at the end to wrap up the episode. But I really do mean it. And I intentionally, as I've said before, use the word deserve because I think it really cuts to the heart of the matter for people. It's one thing to say, take care of yourself. It's another thing to really understand that you deserve to take care of yourself. And I want to be clear that when I say take care of yourself, I'm not saying like do it alone necessarily. I'm saying like notice your needs. And if your needs involve being with other people who take care of you, then that's what it means, right? So I'm not saying you're supposed to be alone in your endeavor to take care of yourself. I'm saying take care of yourself, notice your needs, whatever they are. If they're to isolate, if they are to be with other people, if they're to jump with joy, if they're to cry in pain, then take care of yourself, do it and notice yourself, and you deserve that because you really, really do. We all deserve that. Some people will say like, well, the word deserve is fraught, especially in today's world, like everyone thinks they deserve a trophy just because they participate. Everyone deserves a participation trophy. And okay, whatever. But we all do. It is a human right that, when Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence back, and for the writers of the Constitution, there's this notion that it's an inalienable right, meaning that all humans, and of course back then it just meant rich white landowners, Protestant landowners, but was eventually extended to all people that in the United States, that at least legally speaking, that everyone deserves to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. What is the thing? You could maybe extend it further that, or elaborate on it further, that it's self-evident that you, listening right now, have the right to notice your needs, to take care of yourself, to have other people notice your needs and take care of you. You have that right. It's a human right. It's a human, and I'm sure this is all kind of laid out in the World Health Organization list of human rights, or at least I think that's the organization. And that's, like we all have a right to food and shelter and water and safety and the absence of being abused and harmed through violence and crime. We have rights to property, and we have all these rights, and I think we talk about these a lot, but I don't think we often talk about that you have the right. In fact, we have a lot of cultural notions pointing in the opposite direction, that you're a whiny person, you're a baby, or you're a snowflake, or you have childish expectations that the world should revolve around you or something. And case by case basis, but generally speaking, I find the vast majority of people do not feel that they deserve to take care of themselves, that they deserve to advocate for their needs. So when I do sign off the episode, I do really mean it. And there's, I've said it, I think I have like 3,000 episodes on YouTube now, including the video episodes and the audio ones. So I've signed off that way over 3,000 times. And I'm guessing there's a variability in terms of how heartfelt it felt to me in the moment. But I would say the vast majority of the time, 9 times out of 10, when I, at the beginning of the sign out, it's probably a little rote to me, a little routine. But pretty soon, by the second or third word into the sign out, I actually will purposely and habitually step into that emotional space where I feel it. Partially because I just don't want to be fake. I don't want to be, disingenuous. And I also want it to resonate with people. And I'm not a good actor. So if I'm not feeling it, it'll come out that way. So I have to enter into that space where I'm genuinely feeling it, and then it'll come out in my language because I do want that to be out there. The few people who have told me that it really resonates with them helps me, because I think for a long time, I don't think I'd heard that. And I just figured, well, this is just something I say. I do mean it, but I don't think it really lands with people. It probably just is this random string of words at the end of every episode now because they've heard it so many times. But then I started hearing people saying, like someone even emailed in, because Rebecca, my co-host, will often riff on this. She'll, I'll throw to her and I'll say, please take care of yourself, Rebecca. Why should people take care of themselves? And Rebecca often riffs on some improvisational response to that. And although a lot of people appreciated that, some people were saying, okay, but could you make sure that you actually say the full phrase? Because I kind of depend on that every time. I need to hear that from you or from the listeners. I need to hear that I deserve to take care of myself. It's actually the wind beneath my wings to some extent every day when I hear that. And that says a lot. I mean, it says that I'm in the right zone, because this is literally the purpose of my life. When people tell me about that, when this emailer says that she cries when she hears that, that's the meaning of my life. And to hear that, I can die tomorrow and feel like I did something with myself, it's a big deal to me. And so, there's that, but it's also just like so telling that people are craving that so much, and how little of that is in the world, that so many people are walking around not taking care of themselves, and they don't believe they deserve to do so. That's a crime on humanity, in the same way that depriving people of food and shelter and safety is a crime on humanity. This is also a crime on humanity. It's just awful. So, yeah, when I say take care of yourself because you deserve it, you really do. I really mean it. Particularly by that, when I say it at the end, yes, you really do. I that's maybe when I really kick into high gear in terms of having it be heartfelt from me. Take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do. You do right now. You deserve so much. You deserve so many things. But the base level foundation, you deserve to take care of yourself. You also deserve love and attention and to feel your emotions. You deserve to cry. You deserve to laugh. You deserve to be heard and understood. You deserve someone to ask you how you're doing and care. You deserve someone to pay attention to you. You deserve praise, constant praise. You deserve affirmations. You deserve someone to apologize. You deserve so many apologies. You deserve so many apologies. There are so many people that need to apologize to you. So many people. And this goes for everyone. I'm not saying just you. Everyone deserves countless apologies. Or not, maybe not everyone, but vast majority of people. You deserve people in your life now and in your past to come to you and say, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I have my reasons, but I'm sorry that I hurt you. I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't want to do that. I have issues. I'm sorry. You deserve that. You deserve safety. You deserve secure relationships. You deserve a good therapist. You deserve justice. You deserve economic freedom and viability and security. You deserve a government that understands you and listens to you. You deserve a social media platform that doesn't erode your brain. You deserve a government that understands the future and climate change and is not just, placating to corporations and corporate greed. You deserve that. And you deserve me to tell you that you deserve it, because you do. All right, let's go into another email. All right, anonymous upper tier patron. She wrote in and says, my partner has borderline, and I'm seeing him constantly being triggered by work things. He'll constantly tell me about how everyone at work hates him, and yet when I ask him to elaborate what makes him feel that way, he'll tell me things that happened that I would never interpret as any of those things. All right, just chiming in here. So anonymous upper tier patron is saying, I think my partner has borderline, or maybe she knows that he has borderline, he's been diagnosed. And then when he's at work, he comes home and he's like, oh my God, everyone at work hates me. And then she's like, well, okay, well, what's going on? And then when he elaborates on why he believes that everyone hates him, she's listening. She's like, I don't know if, internally she's thinking, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to me. Seems like you're misinterpreting things. Going on with the email. It seems he's very afraid of being seen negatively and thus interprets everything as confirmation of this. It's been like this across multiple jobs, and it's becoming all-consuming, where almost 100% of our free time together is him talking about this. I want to help him, but it sounds like he has an extremely distorted interpretation of these things at work and how people view him. I don't want to be dismissive, but I also feel I need to push back against these distorted interpretations that are consuming him and consuming all the time outside of work too. Is this common with borderline? Do you have any suggestions for how I can be reassuring without coming across as dismissive? I care a lot and I want him to feel better. End of email. Yeah, well, it's hard for me to know exactly, obviously, because I'm not there and I'm not treating the two of you, but there's a lot of things that So the first question you say is it common with borderline? Yeah, I mean, not this specifically, but distorting relationships is the hallmark, right? Personality disorders at their core are a perceptual disorder, meaning that individuals will perceive things in ways that are very different from the average, or are very in a direction that is harmful to themselves and other people. So for the borderline person, for example, with your husband, he is seeing things that are happening. They're factual things that are happening at work with other people who are, it seems he's very afraid of being seen negatively and thus interprets everything as a confirmation of this. So he's terrified of being seen negatively because probably if he does have borderline, it's because he's terrified of being rejected and betrayed, and believes that is around every corner, and that everyone harbors extremely negative, like the most negative viewpoints about him. And, they hate him. They don't want to be with him. They want to reject him. They want to get rid of him. They're always thinking about how they're going to fire him. And so he's walking around with that schema, that assumption, and, he will see a look or he'll hear something and he'll be, there it is. Oh my God, and it's scary to him. And it's not just losing a job to him. In all likelihood, it's the very foundation of his worth as a human being is based on this. And so is this common to borderline? Yeah. Then you ask, do I have any suggestions on how to be reassuring without coming off as dismissive? Well, yeah. So I could talk for a long time about this because it's very complicated and it's very core to the treatment, or at least my style of treatment for people with borderline and other personality disorders, but just speaking out borderline. And you might be able to benefit from this, anonymous upper tier patron. The temptation when we hear this, and this really goes for maybe anyone, let me give you a flow chart, if you will. So your partner comes to you and tells you something that is upsetting to them somehow, whether it's about work or their family or you or something, and you interpret them as being distorted. You're like, oh, you're looking at that in a distorted way, and it's causing you suffering. So that's what you detect. So, the flow chart is partner comes to me and complains about something that's stressing them out, a relationship. And then you ask the question to yourself, is this person rational or are they irrational? And you're like, okay, this person is irrational. They're perceiving in a distorted way. Okay, that goes in the next bubble on the flow chart. And what you do there is you try to provide perspective. This is cognitive therapy, narrative therapy, interpretation therapy. And you tell the person that, well, are you sure you're seeing that right? Because it doesn't sound that way to me. And so if the person doesn't have a personality disorder, then in all likelihood, if you do it right, they will benefit from it. My wife does this to me all the time. A lot of my stress comes from commenters on YouTube. The vast majority of people on YouTube are very, very kind, or at least neutral, but occasionally there'll be a comment or, I don't know, an email that will really cut to the core and be very hurtful. And so I will occasionally yammer about it. Somehow it's always in the kitchen with my wife, but I have a lot of memories of being in the kitchen and just being like, and another thing, this one person said this, and my wife will say, well, yeah, I saw that too, and I don't know if that's how they meant it. I think you're taking it too far in your head. You're sort of inserting a lot of negativity into it, and I hope most of the time I'm differentiated enough to receive that and to contemplate it and think, oh, she's probably right, because I do, and it's human to do that. So it'll help me, right? Because I'm upset about something that I believe happened, and she's telling me, I don't think that happened, and I think you're seeing it wrong, and thus if you change the way you see it, you will feel differently about it. And then 9 times out of 10, I'm like, oh, and then I feel better. So because I don't have a perceptual disorder, I'm able to adjust. I have flexibility. There's a question mark in my mind enough to be able to say, I wonder if I am disordered. Okay. People who have, particularly moderate to severe personality disorders, especially in the beginning of their insight development, have no insight. They have no ability to ask that question. And for you to ask that question is absurd to them, number one. And number two, it's another betrayal. When you give this impression, and I'm just speaking as a therapist, talking with clients with, let's say, borderline. When I provide a perspective of just like, well, I think you might actually be looking at it negatively, which is resulting in a lot of suffering for you, and also might be resulting in a lot of relationship issues, because when you interpret it that way, you get upset, and then you start to exhibit that upsettedness toward your family member, and thus they get defensive with you, and just sort of spins out of control. And so I don't know, but you might benefit by looking at it differently. Okay, so if the person doesn't have personality disorder and I do it right, they'll respond to me and things will get better relatively quicker than if the person has a personality disorder, in which when I say that, they will not only reject it and go, that's ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about, but they'll also feel like I'm rejecting them because they're sensitive to that anyway. And they think that I'm basically siding with the abuser. Like with my wife, for example, and I'm sure this happens occasionally. I don't know if this has ever happened, but you can see a situation where I go to her and I'm like, oh my God, this email or this comment, or they did this thing, I can't believe it. And Stacey's like, well, I think you're looking at it. That's not how I read it. She never says you're interpreting it wrong, and that's another part of it, is that there's a way to say it that is more helpful, right? And so the way that she says it to me, I think, is usually like, that's not how I read it. I read it like she was saying this, in this tone. And if I had a problem, if I had a inflexibility there, I might feel like, oh, great, she's invalidating my feelings, or, oh, great, she just wants me to shut up. She doesn't want to hear me talk. She's just trying to get rid of me. Or, oh, great, she's a part of the abusive, system. Like, she thinks it's totally fine for someone to abuse me online. I don't think I've ever gone there. But, if I had an issue, I would go there. And so when you're talking with clients or your partner, to provide perspective is a wonderful impulse that will very much backfire unless the person has insight. So the long-term solution is if your partner gets long-term treatment for borderline, because there's almost no way out of this situation for you, anonymous upper tier patron, that will have a positive outcome unless your partner gets focused, specialized, competent treatment and participates in that treatment meaningfully. You're basically choosing from several lesser evils. For example, kind of the best case scenario for you, anonymous upper tier patron, is your partner starts to complain about work, and then you say, oh my God, I can't believe they did that to you. Or, oh my God, I could see how you would really feel rejected or scared, or unfairly put upon. So in your mind, you're like, well, I think they're distorting this, but I want to validate them, and I don't want to aggravate them in this moment. So I might as well just focus on what I can validate, which is, that they feel unfairly harmed. And so I'm going to validate. It's like, wow, I can see how you would feel unfairly harmed by that. I'm sorry you're going through that. And the reason why this is a lesser evil is because in your mind, you're thinking, but I'm not actually fixing the problem. I might even be kind of perpetuating it because I'm agreeing with their perspective. I'm basically saying that their perspective is valid. And that's not a good thing because they're going to continue to misinterpret things. Okay. And this is true in early stages of therapy with borderline, or with narcissism or something, or histrionic. You have to, there's a progression to this. And the beginning, you have to, again, pick from lesser evils. And one is where you basically just agree with the person. You give the person validation. You might even be perpetuating the bad perspective. But to have a delusion that somehow you're going to be able to change their perspective by just suggesting that their perspective or their lens is wrong is a fool's errand. So you might as well do what you can, right? It's sort of like, to be like severe with my analogies, is you're an EMT worker, an ambulance worker, and you show up at a car accident and someone has a lot of injuries and they have broken bones, they have a concussion or something. So, and you're not going to be able to fix that on the road. They need to go to the hospital. They need multiple, surgeons or whatever. But what you can do is you can stop the bleeding by, putting a tourniquet on, or you can drive them to the hospital. There are some things you can do to help, but you're not going to solve the problem. There's too much of a bigger issue here. So that's what I'll say, that's often, so that's how you can be reassuring, is accept that you're never going to be able to fix their problem on your own, is the thing. Then maybe later on, you might be able to say, hey, I just want to throw out there that maybe, I don't know, get a therapist to help you with it is the best thing I could say. The other thing I'll say is, everyone does this. Everyone. I do this. My wife does it. Everyone I know does this. We all get up in arms about things that are often a result of distortions or exaggerations or overreactivity. It's a hallmark of what it's like to be a human, and it's normal. So your husband isn't doing anything that strange. And so I just wanted to say, everyone out there, whenever you're being yammered at by someone that needs your help, is sometimes the best approach when you're hearing it is just to validate, just hear them and do it genuinely. You might have your thoughts, you might have your perspectives and your criticisms and your advice to the person, but really, really, really orient yourself to fully validating and hearing the person. You just really go, wow, that sounds rough. Tell me more. What'd that feel like? How are you doing right now with that? What do you want to do with it? Is there a solution to it? What do you think? Really just stay in their world. Like, there's so much good that can happen from that. So many good things. And especially if you're a therapist, right? But really, all of you. And you deserve that too. You deserve people to give you that space without jumping to advice or perspective change or whatever. There's so many wonderful things that occur when that happens. Because one way to look at it is, if you're a therapist or a partner, is that when you give people that validation and that space, they will calm down because they feel that's what they're looking for. They're up in arms because they feel harmed. And when you do the opposite of harm and you take care of them, they regulate. And when they regulate, they can differentiate. I'm rhyming right now. Meaning that if you give them enough, things to, validation or hearing them so that they can calm down, then they'll have the space and the capacity to wonder if their perspective is off. They can do that themselves, is the thing. Or at the very least, once you get them there, then you can introduce that topic. But don't start with it, for crying out loud. All right, let's take a break and we get back more emails. All right, so if you want to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com. This first bit of the episode is going to be for everyone, but then the end of the episode will just be for patrons of the podcast. Just a little warning there. All right, this email is from patron Grant. They write, "What is going on when someone ghosts you and then tries to come back? I've been dating, and this has happened quite often. When I am ghosted and end up not taking the individual back, they get upset with me. What could be the reasonings behind this?" End of email. Well, I don't know. I mean, of course, there could be millions of different possible reasons for this, but if I were just to take a guess, I could say that when either they're not actually ghosting you and you're just thinking they're ghosting you. So someone dates you and then you think they're ghosting you and you get upset, and then they're just calling you up or texting you and saying, "Hey, let's go on our third date." And you're just like, "What? Why? You ghosted me." And they're like, "What? I didn't ghost you. What are you talking?" So there could be that possibility. There's another possibility that they know they ghosted you, but they, I could imagine a fair amount of, because one of the problems with current dating milieu is that there's this endless supply of options for people on these apps, seemingly, and particularly if you're in a large metropolitan area. And if there's any kind of issue with a date, whether there's awkwardness or some kind of concern or worry, some might have a tendency to just jump ship because there's this massive sea of fish that are just in your phone ready to go. So I could see a situation where someone is approaching it problematically like that. They go on a date with you. There's a little bit of a snafu, or someone else comes along that might seem a little better. They do ghost you, and they know they're ghosting you, but then these other options don't really pan out, and so they're like, "Oh, I should go back to the other person." They try to come back to you, and you're like, "Wait, you ghosted me," and they're like, "No, I didn't. What are you talking about?" And maybe there's a cultural pocket that considers that normal and stuff. Who knows? So I could see that happening. I could see a scenario where someone is purposely trying to manipulate people, and they're just not an okay person to date, I guess. I could see how someone could ghost, not necessarily because of other options, but, and I imagine this is actually true a lot of the time, is that there's a lot of people, especially today, that, they go online, they start to online date, and they go on a couple dates, and then they get scared. There's a lot of fear of what is happening, like, well, what if they reject me, or what if I'm choosing the wrong person? And people will just avoid. So they're not like trying to ghost you, but they're socially anxious, just not replying to you. And from your perspective, you're being ghosted, but from their perspective, they're just sticking their head in the sand. They don't think of themselves as ghosting you. They're just like terrified. And then maybe they go to therapy, or they get some perspective, or maybe they have a couple drinks one night and they're just like, "You know what? Stop avoiding. I'm going to reach out to that person because I really liked him," or something. And then they text you, and it's been a couple weeks, and you're just like, "What the hell?" So from your perspective, they're ghosting you and then coming back to you. But from their perspective, they are just occasionally struggling with avoiding the situation because they're terrified. And then they get upset with you because from their perspective, they didn't ghost you. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. All right, this next email is from up-tier patron Rebecca from Scotland. She says, "I feel the podcast in some ways has taught me to almost recognize too much of my own problems. Like you've given me a book that explains everything, but I don't have a professional there to help me put it into practice, and I don't know what to do in the meantime. Due to the pandemic and not being able to progress in trauma therapy online, my psychologist decided to end my case. It's now been reopened. It took me 15 months last time to be seen, and then 4 years of therapy, and then we didn't get to the trauma work. I'm terrified of how long the wait will be this time around." End of email. Yeah, well, Rebecca, I get that. I, on the podcast, talk about a lot of things generally, and then you as a listener will say like, "Oh, I think that kind of applies to me," or "I can utilize that concept to explore things. Wow, I have a lot of issues. I have a lot of traumas. I didn't really think about that before, and I'm learning more and more about myself and more reasons why I need therapy, and I can see more and more years of therapy ahead of me because of the things I've learned in this podcast. And Kirk doesn't actually provide me with any way to fix this problem. Like, I'm cataloging all these issues, and there's no way for me to actually work on these issues because of the state of mental health care or my situation or the pandemic or something. And yeah, I get that. I don't obviously know the answer to that. I don't know for you, Rebecca, but I imagine for a lot of people, and I've talked with clients around this as well, that there's this notion that somehow when you know something about yourself, you have to fix it right away. And so I would put that aside if you're adhering to that. The other thing is that now that you know you have a problem, somehow that makes that brings the problem into existence. But that usually isn't the case. Usually the problem has always been in existence, and now you just see it. So to me, this is just personally, I would rather know about a problem and have a delay in my ability to fix it than to not know about the problem and thus not recognize that I have a lot of issues that are going to take a lot of time to work, and maybe it's going to be hard to find treatment for it. And to be out of awareness of a problem means the problem can kind of just do what it wants to do on its own without me putting checks and balances on it, Like, if I have relational traumas that are causing me to be, well, for me, for example, I have an issue with, flaw shame and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I'm mild on the spectrum. I'm not diagnosable with it, but I'm in that direction. And to be unaware of it means that the triggers of criticism on me will cause a lot of difficulty for me, and I won't be able to put it into perspective. I'll just be stewing in my own anxiety and my own self-shame and distress and think that it's normal, But once I figured it out, then it doesn't end the problem, but at least I can look at it and say, like, oh, my mild OCPD is flaring up again, and there's no emergency. And a great deal of the way I look at this and the urgency I feel around it is distorted from my lens, my schemas. So I even without treatment, I believe in a lot of situations we benefit from the insight and the knowledge of ourselves just in and of itself. But I don't know your situation, Rebecca, and I get it. And I've talked with a lot of people about this, particularly if one has a lot of traumas in one's life and you are suddenly faced with looking at all of it and just overwhelmed with the amount of difficulties you've been through and the amount of therapy ahead of you. And it can be overwhelming. And really, the problem is that you're having trouble finding a clinician that will be able to be there for you consistently and help you with it. Like that, yeah, that's just upsetting. And I'm sorry you're going through that. All right, so there's a number of emails regarding grief that I thought I would address here. Anonymous Separateur Patron, she says, my sister-in-law's organs have stopped responding to chemo. She has terminal breast cancer. She's 41 with a 5-year-old child and a husband. Everything seems to be happening so fast. My partner and I are going to spend time with them at the end of the month. I wondered if you had any advice for supporting a family of people you love through something so scary. And also if you have any advice specifically for a child of that age who is very likely losing their primary caretaker. End of email. Yeah, well, first off, Anonymous Separateur Patron, I'm sorry that you and your family are going through that. It's just extremely upsetting, even to hear from my distance perspective. It's just tragic. There's so much pain in and around this, and uncertainty and unfairness around it, really. Like, why did the universe decide to do this to your sister-in-law? It's pretty awful. Advice for supporting a family of people. Yeah, it's variable, of course, case by case, and there's so many different possibilities, but the general principle is, one, take care of yourself because you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself. So notice what you need, and then be attuned. That's the issue. Don't think about like, okay, what should I do? Do I do this? Think about attunement, that you notice, and maybe it requires reaching out and talking with them, but you notice the mood and the emotion that they're experiencing, and then you attune yourself and respond accordingly. Because for people that are grieving, like the 5-year-old child, it's normal to go through periods where you don't really want to grieve. You don't want to be sad. You don't want to think about it. You want to rebuild, as they say. You might even just want to chill and laugh and watch a comedy or something. And so if you're attuned, then you will notice that, and you will go with them where they want to go with that. Now, you're also grieving yourself, so maybe it doesn't always align. Maybe you want to grieve and your brother wants to rebuild. And how does that match up with each other? So it's complicated. And then you ask, is there any advice specifically for a child of that age, 5-year-old? Yeah, same really. And best case scenario, there's a village that is taking care of that 5-year-old, including your brother, the father. And that, because he's, going through a lot, and to expect him to pull the weight of the situation by himself is unreasonable. Now, it's not your responsibility. I mean, it sounds like you don't live in their town, so that makes it harder. And it's just another reason why people really need to consider moving away from their support system and their family. People tend to do it very readily. There's nothing wrong inherently with it, but there are risks that I just think people need to consider, and this is one of them. Now, I'm not blaming you, Anonymous Aperture Patron, but just imagine if in these situations you had all of your family and extended family within driving distance, how easily it would be to facilitate a village approach to taking care of that 5-year-old. You know what I mean? There's really no way out of the 5-year-old suffering greatly. Yeah, there's just no way out of that. And there's no way out of the 5-year-old developing issues around it, because there's just no way out of it. It's a huge tragedy. It's a huge loss. You're saying it's the 5-year-old's primary parent is his mom or their mom. And so, it's just a tragedy all around. Attunement is the key. Support is the key. Grief process is the key. And, you just muddle your way through it. All right, let's take a break. And actually, the rest of the episode will just be for patrons of the podcast. So if you want to listen to the whole episode, become a patron and you can hear the rest, where I will read more emails. Looks like there's 3 more about grief, and then a lot of other emails about other various things. So if you're not a patron, do so now. Go to patreon.com if you want.